Well, hello there. Hi, how are you doing? This episode is all about a very practical and very tactical process that it's been around in recruitment for a really long time, right? It has this label. The label probably doesn't help, but you can see by the title, everything that we're going to look at in this session is all about the thing called the candidate flip. Now, if you're not familiar with the candidate flip, or maybe you call it something else, personally I reference it as the PTR, potential to recruit. What we're talking about here is individuals who you encounter who perhaps are in candidate mode. They're looking for that next opportunity. They may be doing so with some energy and some visibility because they're open to work on LinkedIn, they're applying to adverts, or perhaps they're being a little cuter, a little more covert, and having a little tiptoe. But either way, they're currently responsible for a team. They are therefore a manager who, if they had a vacancy, we might describe them as being a hiring manager. And because of that, building a relationship with that human being helps us to be able to foster a relationship with a business professional who may choose at any moment to give us jobs and vacancies, just as simply as they may choose to give us their CV and ask us to help them to be able to find their next role. So this concept of the candidate flip, it seems to be getting some people's knickers in a bit of a twist, and I can understand why. On Rookie to Recruiter, so if you're familiar with Rookie to Recruiter, platform that I manage, it's an entire ecosystem, it's a people engine to be able to create learning and development opportunities for consultants at all levels. Sat on top of it is an AI agent called Recruitment Wisdom. Recruitment Wisdom gives the membership the opportunity to ask questions. So they can ask a question, and the question might be, how do I reduce candidate dropouts? The question might be, how do I increase the response rates from my cold outreach emails? Recruitment Wisdom then indexes an answer based upon the content that I have created to share a plan and to share some reference points in terms of videos to watch, maybe activities to do, and PDFs to download. You get the trick, right? But ultimately, this AI agent, it's often asked questions by consultants at moments when they feel stuck. And there has been a pattern of questions that have all revolved around, hey, Recruitment Wisdom, could you help me to get better at being able to execute a more proficient or accurate or valuable flip of my senior candidates? And many of them go to lengths in the question to describe what can only be seen as being a feeling of awkwardness, that if I've been engaging with this human as a candidate, and we keep on having these nice warm conversations about life as a candidate, how do I propose the idea of, please may I recruit for you? And it probably starts with how we think about it, right? Because the challenge appears to be that if you're engaging with this person, and you're having conversations about candidacy. Hey, what are you looking for in your next role? What kind of company do you want to join? How are you going to know if it's the right thing? Where are you up to in that search? What kind of timescales are you working towards? How many days holiday are you going to allocate for things like interviewing, like proper candidate conversation? If we over-segment in our own mind the difference between a candidate and a client, the void that we've created, we're now trying to find the bridge. But we built the void. So if we don't build the void, then there is no need for a bridge. Does that make sense? Because the people who we are talking to are people. They don't have a different personality. They don't have a different set of chemistry inside their body as they think about being a client and a candidate. Because rarely do they think about being a client or a candidate. I very much doubt that they go through a process in their own mind of being able to reconcile what noun will this agency use to describe me? Will they describe me as being a client or a candidate? And I've sat in agencies where somebody has phoned and the phone has been answered in the agency and the person has been asked the question, oh, you'd like to speak to Gary. Are you a client or a candidate of his? And I think that may cause some confusion for the person calling in because maybe they're not sure. Would you call me a client? Would you call me a candidate? These are individuals, people. And the more we close the void, the gap in our own mind between the difference between a candidate and a client, and we just start to treat people as being humans, humans who work in a specific industry, or use a certain skill set, or serve a certain market. Does that make sense? So if you recruit engineers, whether the person is an engineering manager, a principal engineer, a junior engineer, a design engineer, they're still a person. And that person does this thing called work, and work has a purpose for them. And the purpose of work for them may be relatively basic, like it's a source of income to help to be able to pay for food, shelter, transport, and maybe the odd luxury. For some of them it is more than that. For some of them it is a career. It is a vehicle to help them to be able to create betterment. It's something that has a vector, it has direction, and it has velocity. And because they see it as being a vector, it's really important to them that as they make transitions in their career, they're making the right step that helps them to be able to grow, that helps them to be able to advance, that helps them to be able to follow the trajectory that they had hoped that they would be on when they initially graduated, or as they started to work out in their first few years of employment. What is the purpose of this thing called work? And just think for a moment about you. Like, what is the purpose of work for you? And if you see that work is something greater than a source of income to pay for food, shelter, transportation and the odd luxury, then perhaps you're from time to time thinking about what's going to be next. These are human thoughts, right? So as we encounter a human being who currently manages a team of 6 people, is putting great consideration into their next opportunity because they've decided it's time to make a move because of the trajectory they would like to be on, let's invest some time understanding that trajectory. Let's be less transactional about the simplicities of notice periods, salaries, locations, job content, industry. And let's talk to them about the trajectory. Let's talk to them about the pathway. And let's understand, what do you feel are going to be the core skills that you need to be developing as you're on that trajectory? What do you feel that you've taken from your current role and your employer that you can bring to the next? And as we talk to these individuals, a component of their success has been their ability to manage and to lead teams. It's neither a client or a candidate conversation to ask somebody the question, how do you go about structuring your team? It is an understanding of an individual. To think about the proposition that may exist in terms of the opportunities for future professional development, as well as the opportunities that may exist to help them to secure the right role in the right organisation. So as we start to invest some time understanding the things that really matter, when a company is seeking to hire somebody whose title will be manager or lead or principal or head of or senior director, although it may be a technical role, although it may be a role that has ingrained skill sets that are required, that are directly linked to the job in terms of duties and responsibilities, what also goes with it is the ability to be able to lead, to manage, to recruit, to hire and fire, all of those things. Those are the soft skills. And there are plenty of highly skilled engineers, for example, who aren't particularly good at motivating and leading teams. And there are some really strong managers out there who seem to have mastered the art of being able to bring together a collegiate group of ninja engineers, and there may only be 6 of them, but they could outperform the productivity of 100 others. So leadership is a really important component. So this moment that we interview this individual, and we start to understand their goals, their objectives, their trajectory, we start to talk to them about their strengths, their approach, their style. We can ask them what we might consider to be client sales questions as genuine understanding questions of an individual as a candidate. And as we start to understand a bit more about, talk to me about your approach to leading teams. How many people do you have in your team? How long have they all worked for you? You started 3 years ago. How many of them did you inherit? What teething problems did that bring? How do you tend to go about ensuring that you get to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your teams so that in your first 100 days you be successful in your next job? When was the last time that you hired somebody? What process do you tend to follow? When was the last time you had any training on how to be able to interview people, to be able to assess suitability, capability and fit? When was the last time you made a hire that you regretted, and what did you learn from that? Talk to me about the succession planning that takes place in your organisation, because as you start to make those considerations to move on, who do you feel will be your successor? Have you built that opportunity for someone to be able to step up, or do you feel it's going to be an external hire? Is everyone with me in what I'm doing here? I'm doing a deep dive understanding of this person's capabilities, strengths, so that I can match them to the right role. And I'm not embarrassed about the fact that I am a person who networks and gets to understand individuals as professionals in this marketplace, because I know that we will work together. We will work together because I may help you to find your next opportunity. We may work together because I may give you counsel to help you to be able to improve your current situation so you maintain your trajectory without having to change jobs. Or we may work together because ultimately, whether you stay where you are, you go somewhere else, you may need to do work to strengthen, to grow, or to develop your team. And I'm pretty good at doing that. So what I become is your full Swiss Army knife Sherpa, that whatever you're looking to do to help you to be able to develop your career trajectory, build teams, hire contractors, make decisions about reward schemes, think about the succession planning, and not just hire another engineer, but perhaps find the person who could become your natural successor. And when the time is right, maybe talk to you about opportunities which are out there, help you to be able to ensure that you are on the right trajectory and pathway. And together, we may be able to help each other in our own professional betterment. So this concept of the candidate flip, I think even calling it the candidate flip is what gives some people the hesitation. It's not a judo move. It's not like, hey, candidate, flip, client call. We're having a conversation with one person, with one chemistry set, with one thought process. And you know, I don't mind if you start to declare cards a little earlier to say, hey, I'm really impressed with some of the work that you've been involved with. It sounds as though you've got a clear plan as to what your career trajectory looks like. However this call pans out, I'd really welcome the opportunity to work together. Whether that's discussing covertly other organisations perhaps you could be exploring, or a little more overtly helping you to be able to strengthen your team if you decide that staying put is the right decision. Either way, I'd like to think we could work together. And as I become a little more open in my willingness to be transparent, it changes my perception of what I'm doing. I'm no longer trying to be in stealth mode to creep up behind the candidate and go, boo, be a client. I'm engaging with them so that they understand the true value of the relationship as a business relationship, not as a friendship. I can get caught in the friend zone, make really good friends with a candidate, become really intimate with them in terms of conversations about stuff that perhaps I wouldn't talk to clients about, like pets and things that give us the ick and things that we watched on telly and you know, chatter. And that makes it even more difficult because if I put my clients on pedestals, now how do I go from being in the friend zone having chatter with this person as a peer to then try and pedestal them to become my customer? We are victims often of the things that we construct for ourselves. If we construct the void, the gap between the definition of candidate and client, and we struggle to build the bridge, we're now trying to engineer something that we created as a problem. If we overly pedestal individuals when we think about them as being clients, and we get caught in what we feel is the friend zone with somebody as a candidate, no wonder we struggle with the concept of, how do I now feel like I'm breaking breaking the vows and the promises and the things that we've spoken about as recruiter and candidate to now talk about recruiter and client. And if I then construct this ego-driven narrative that they're just going to clearly know that from the beginning, like, I never even wanted them as a candidate. They're going to feel dirty and used because now I've suggested that I might be able to hire for them. How do I have the hiring conversation with them without having the hiring conversation with them so that it becomes their idea? This is all self-generated challenge. Because it's self-generated, it means we can remove it as quickly as we snap our fingers. It's our thought process. So that means we could now take to our CRM system. We could do a search. We could do a search to find all of the human beings that declared some form of expression of interest in being a candidate in the past who may be operating at a hiring manager level or above. And we could put in some update calls. Hey, it's been some time. Where are you at? What's the crack? Tell me a couple of stories. What's life like? How do you feel about your trajectory? Happy where you are? What might it take? Do you have an image as to what temptation could be? It sounds as though things are pretty well looked after. I feel as though there could be some value that I could help in other areas. How do you feel about your succession plan? How do you feel about the strength of your team? If you've got a team of 20 people and they say that any one time 15% of people are actively considering making a move, you've got 3 people who are having those thoughts. Who would you like to be thinking that? Who do you hope it's not? And which of those people do you think is most likely to get snapped up if they became visible to some of your competitors? So what's your plan to keep hold of them? Do you want to have a look at a salary survey? Do you want to hear a little bit more about some of the work we've been doing to help organisations improve the quality of their retention with well-timed stay interviews? Or could it be useful for us to talk about the benefits of building out a bench of pre-qualified talent? So if you find yourself in a position where you're reacting to an unforeseen event, you have half a dozen people that we've already started to build those relationships with. And we could start to build that bench for you. Because in my experience, the worst time to start hiring is the moment that you need somebody. It is better to hire and start to find your next employees before you need them, so that when the time comes, you can move at speed. You know, and how we integrate these conversations, how we build out these micro scripts, how we start to position ourselves as being partners to professionals rather than a 2-portfolio recruiter who has a portfolio of client customers and a portfolio of candidate customers, and therefore a portfolio of engagement tactics for clients and a portfolio of engagement tactics for candidates, and hasn't really worked out how do I glue the 2 things together as portfolios, because that feels like I need a flip. So maybe, only maybe if you were less hung up on this whole idea of flipping it, and you started to get a little bit more bought into the idea of deeper engagement, better understandings of the playbooks that your prospects are actually using to help them to navigate this thing called life, particularly the bit that revolves around work. Because often the 2 things intertwine together, right? There probably isn't such thing as work-life balance, there is life. And a component in life is work, and work has a different purpose for us according to where we are in our lifeline. And that's really interesting, isn't it? That the word lifeline, we translate that into German, it becomes Lebenslauf, and Lebenslauf is the German word for CV, lifeline. We still seem to be hanging on to curriculum vitae as if the Romans were still here. And there goes another day where I haven't managed to not think about the Romans. So, folks, I hope you're with me in terms of how I'm describing this, perhaps a fresh set of eyes and a different perspective, and then maybe a realignment in terms of how you position yourself with these people. And this positioning that you do with these people, it's your decision to start sticking badges all over them about clients and candidates and all of these things. Just stick one nice badge on them saying, professional in my market. Because you might actually find that a conversation ebbs and flows between candidate, client, client, candidate, 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 client, and so does your relationship. But the relationship doesn't shift from being a relationship with Sheila and Sheila doesn't really feel a great deal of difference in the interactions that she's having with you, simply because it is clienty content or it is candidate-y content. Sheila's just having a great conversation with Jeremy. So if you've got any questions, drop me a note. If you've got any feedback, I'd love to hear. And if there are subjects that you feel could be the next piece of whatever it is I do on the podcast, let me know. I'm always interested in being able to share stuff which is relevant to you. See you soon. Have fun. Be good. Work hard. Be super powerful.